Chapter 12. A Vessel for Knowledge. Cedra's grandfather, Jayden quickly realized, was one of those rare people who had absolutely no buffer between his thoughts and the words that exited his mouth, pointing out flaws and inconsistencies with the subtlety of a car-born merchant trying to talk a customer out of their valuables. On the flip side, since the three of them had arrived at the temple, he had made every possible effort to make them comfortable and tend to their needs. It was a startling contradiction that kept him guessing what the old man was going to say or do next. Amazingly, Quandus's blunt manner when referring to the condition of his granddaughter as gangly, homely, and scrawny only served to brighten her smile. Jayden assumed that she was either immune to his comments at this point, or that it was some sort of secret game between them. The old man certainly had no right to be calling anyone scrawny, seeing as he was mostly skin and bones himself. Every family developed their own unique way of communicating, he supposed. Quandus fed them a hot meal of potato soup in wooden bowls for dinner, seasoned with a variety of spices that made the meager fare passable. They sat around the oak table in the back room of the temple, eating until they could hardly move. It was apparent by the books strung about everywhere, and the unwashed dishes on the table from a previous meal, that the old man spent the majority of his time in the little room. After a brief attempt at small talk, Quandus insisted on cutting straight to the point of things. They gave the old man an edited summary of their adventures on the way to the temple. The aged historian nearly choked when they told him about the trolls, before beginning a tirade of lecturing and chastisement so in-depth that Jayden could not help but be impressed by the man's thoroughness. Even Spurion was not exempt from the old man's ire, his wizardly status only serving to place more blame on him than on anyone. Some of the subjects that Quandus harped on were not even related to the journey. Jayden had to stifle a gasp when Quandus remarked that Spurion's beard had all the substance of a prepubescent boy's, and advised the wizard that he should immediately begin to grow proper facial hair, if indeed he could. Spurion, spitting mad at first, had oddly enough begun to suffer the tongue-lashing in silence, slumping down into his seat in some sort of funk, perhaps regretting his decision to come to the temple after all. When the wizard became unresponsive to his jibes, Quandus turned his verbal prodding on Jayden.
"I've seen skeletons with more meat on their bones than you, boy," he continued. "Lucky for the two of you, my granddaughter has at least a modicum of sense, thanks to good breeding. Otherwise, neither of you would have made it half so far. Spiders and trolls, indeed. You'd think the rightful prince of the realm would know a better route than that to get to a temple situated in his own land. What were you doing out in the middle of the forest anyway, boy?"
Jayden had known that the subject would come up. Fortunately, Cedra came to his rescue, saving him from a lie that the astute historian would surely have seen through.
"That's his own business, Papa. Leave him be." "I only wanted—"
"You want to start trouble is what you want," she remarked, cutting him short. "The truth is, I never would have found you if they had not come along. Now be a polite host and stop pestering them." Instead of blowing up at the reprimand, he gave her a sheepish smile akin to a wayward boy caught leaving the coop door open for the chickens to escape.
"Very well. At least now you are safe here with me. The world outside of this little vale has gone crazy. Nothing ventures near the temple, for some odd reason, not so much as a butterfly. I have some theories on that, but we can discuss such business in detail since we will all be staying here for a good long while."
"I have to be on my way," Jayden said louder than he intended, jolted into a response by the prospect of staying. "I have to get to Mora."
"Mora? Horrible place, covered in fog more often than not. Why in the split would you want to go there?"
"We are all going," said Spurion, surprising them by breaking his silence. His eyes were sunken, and there was a sour twist to his lips.
"What is wrong with you, man?" asked Quandus. "You look pale. By my beard, the soup was not that bad."
"I need fresh air," he told them, rising. He moved woodenly through the building and outside, the others following, curious. When he reached the fountain, he gripped the rim of the dry pool and rested his weight on his hands.
"Beautiful time, spring,"
said Quandus slyly, admiring the scenery in the slanted light of the late afternoon.
"Lots of places to explore around here, you know. Just through those trees there is a waterfall that cascades hundreds of feet over a sheer cliff face before it meets with the lake. Yes, you'll enjoy the spring here."
"I told you, we must all go to Mora with the boy."
The wizard looked even worse now, his eyes hidden in the deepening shadows. "Are you sure you are all right?" asked a worried Cedra.
"I do not understand."
Spurion stared up at the statue in confusion. Without warning, his eyes rolled back in his head, and he fell to the ground in front of the fountain, limp. No one moved at first, too shocked to react. Then Quandus started shouting orders.
"Pick him up, gently. Bring him inside."
Jayden and Cedra complied, lugging the surprisingly heavy mage through the temple into a side chamber with a soft cot set against the back wall. They rested him carefully atop the cot, while Quandus lit the 5 candles in a brass candelabra that stood on a little nightstand amidst a clutter of books. Then he told Cedra to mix something in the kitchen to help the wizard's breathing. She shot out of the door, leaving Jayden to watch as Quandus began a quick examination of Spurion's vital signs. "Is he alive?"
"Of course he is alive, boy. Don't be overdramatic. He has a heavier load to bear now, and must get used to it. That is all."
"What do you mean?"
"His master is gone, slain by the hand of the betrayer."
The old man checked under Spurion's eyelids.
"The great tower is empty. Now he and the rest of the Brotherhood must shoulder the—"
He appeared to catch himself, turning an accusing eye on Jayden.
"Never you mind about that. Behind the building is an old well. Go make yourself useful and fetch a bucket of water for Cedra to boil."
"But if what you say is true—"
"Be off!"
The old man's tone indicated that he would brook no argument. A dazed Jayden soon found himself lowering a wooden bucket down the long, brick-encased shaft of the well, pondering Quandus's words. Surely there could not be any truth to what he said. Alamon was the master of the great tower, and the most powerful mage that the world had ever known. He could not die just when they needed him most. The very thought was unspeakable. No, Quandus was obviously mistaken. Just the ramblings of an old man who had become a little delusional out in the woods by himself for so long. The sun was beginning to set as he pulled the full bucket of water over the lip of the well. He discovered Cedra in a small room across the main hall from the sleeping area, with a wood stove, cupboards, and a little round table with a single chair. A neat stack of newly split logs lined one wall, and a fire was already burning in the belly of the iron stove. She nearly bumped into him coming through the door. "Oh, thank you, Jayden," she said, taking the bucket from him. She poured some of the water into an iron kettle with a handle, which she placed on the stove, and began rummaging through the cupboards. He did not want to insult her, but he had to know if her grandfather still had his wits about him. It was a delicate subject, on which he would have to tread carefully. "It was kind of your grandfather to take us in," he began. "He seems like an interesting character." "It isn't his temple, and he is a mischievous, crotchety old man," Cedra laughed. "I love him, though. The thoughts help me, and my mother loved him. He raised me on his own after she died, though I was old enough I could have fended for myself at that point, I suppose. It was a comfort to be with family, though. Could you crush these and put them in the kettle, please?" She passed him a clump of dried leaves, which he awkwardly began to break apart with his hands. "He did say one thing that puzzles me." "What was that? He usually speaks his mind quite clearly." Looking into her eyes, he realized that they had been through too much in their short time together to be anything but direct. "He claims that Alamon is dead." She paused, biting her lower lip in contemplation. "I don't mean to contradict him, of course, but it can't be true. It just can't. How could he know that, when Spurion himself believes that Alamon will come to our aid when the time is right?" "If Grandfather says a thing, it is usually true. He has a way of knowing events almost before they happen. He always has." "But this? How could he know such a thing, out here all alone?" Cedra looked troubled, clearly struggling with the conundrum herself. "I don't know. Perhaps he will explain himself later. Right now, we need to focus on Spurion." "Yes, of course." She finished adding the ingredients into the concoction she was brewing and had him tear some strips from an old towel. After it had boiled for a few minutes, she removed the kettle from the stovetop and placed the rags in the water. Jayden sniffed at the steam, the piquant vapor causing his eyes to water. "What's in it?" "Eucalypt, parsons, and just a dash of nightbloom, but not enough to keep him from waking.
It will help him breathe and numb any pain from the inside out.
Jayden volunteered to carry the kettle across the main chamber to the sleeping quarters, using a clean, folded rag to keep from burning himself on the handle. He was careful not to spill any along the way, or inhale too much of the steam. He still did not trust that night bloom. He had to stop twice as the dust that had been stirred up from their presence nearly caused him to sneeze. The old man was waiting for them with an impatient scowl on his face when they arrived. Spurion was still unconscious.
Did you have to pick the night bloom and grind it first?
Quandus grumbled.
No, grandfather,
Cedra replied smoothly.
After I waded through the sea of dust you've cultivated, I had to dig through a series of cupboards that appear to have been organized by a troll and then ravaged by some sort of storm.
The old man raised his brow in mock offense.
I've been busy, but I do try to keep things neat when I can.
I am sure the dust bunnies appreciate your efforts.
Quandus muttered something under his breath about the ungratefulness of children and pointed to where Jayden should set the kettle.
Careful! I've seen bumblebees with steadier hands.
Jayden wanted to inform him that bumblebees did not have hands, but he wasn't completely sure they didn't, and it wasn't worth the risk of looking foolish, so he kept the comment to himself. He sat the kettle down, and Quandus reached in to remove the rags.
Ow! It's hot!
Water becomes that way when you boil it, grandfather,
Cedra informed him, causing the old man to cackle with delight. Family, Jayden thought. What I would not give. Quandus carefully wrung the excess water from the rags, switching from hand to hand when they became too hot, and placed them on the sleeping wizard's chest. They waited silently for a time, letting the steam do its work. Finally, Quandus announced that he would make the three of them some pallets on the floor for beds, and went to work gathering all of the soft materials he could find. Cedra and Jayden busied themselves starting a fire in the big fireplace at the back of the main hall, from which warmth quickly spread to the other rooms. After that, Cedra decided to have a go at the floor. When she asked her grandfather for a broom, the best that he could produce was a stick with a few pieces of bent straw attached, so she employed Jayden's services in helping her search for materials to make a new one. The tall grass opposite the front courtyard, where the horses had been grazing since they arrived, was the closest thing they could find to straw. Gathering an armful of the thick grass stalks, they took them to the kitchen and proceeded to cut them into pieces of equal length. Next, they needed something to lash the pieces to the old broomstick with, so they went to the study to try and find something that might resemble string. Many of the books were bound with leather cords to keep them closed when traveling. While Jayden did not think it was a very good idea to use the cords for such a mundane task, Cedra felt they would be perfect. He took note of some of the titles as they searched for a cord the right length for the job. "Sciences of the Perusian Nobility?" he read aloud. "I have never even heard of the Perusians."
They lived in ancient Spurion. They were wiped out by plague and hill tribes mainly, a few hundred years before the Arcanic era.
She laughed at the surprised look on his face.
Did His Highness just learn something from a poor peasant girl?
No. Yes. I just didn't think... I'm sorry, he stammered.
I grew up with a historian. I was taught to read early, and grandfather would share every tidbit of knowledge he thought I was capable of retaining. He loves his books more than he loves people. Don't laugh, I really mean that. You should see him with a light of new discoveries in his eyes. It is hard to imagine that he is an old man in those moments.
She untied the thin strip of leather that she had chosen to complete their new broom, and turned to leave, but Jayden was so caught up in the books that he did not want to go. He had read nearly every book in Eridan's extensive public library, and all of the ones in the smaller private library in Crysin Castle. Still, he did not recognize most of the titles here. The End of Nations was one of his father's most treasured possessions, passed down from generation to generation since his family's ancestors had come to Alnorda, yet the copy he knew was tattered to the point that much of it was illegible. The temple had a matching copy that appeared to be in near-perfect condition. Cedra must have sensed his delight, for a knowing look crossed her face and she smiled secretively.
I see I've lost my helper. Be careful, or grandfather might think you in need of a tutor. Ryanthorn or no, he's a merciless taskmaster.
The idea was not as frightening as Cedra might think. He had always been an avid student of history and many other subjects. His favorite books had always been about tactics and the great generals who had used them, but he would read just about any book he could get his hands on. Not surprisingly, he found himself a few hours later seated in Quandus's favorite chair, poring over the previously unread pages of The End of Nations, with the tapers that Quandus had lit during their dinner burnt down nearly a quarter of the way. A low clearing of the throat announced Cedra's return. "How is Spurion?" he asked instantly, feeling guilty that he had not stirred from the book to check on the ailing wizard.
"No change. Grandfather says he is only sleeping soundly, so I guess that is good news. I am supposed to tell you that it is bedtime and that you need your rest so you can begin your studies bright and early tomorrow."
Jayden grinned. "You did warn me. I suppose I should get some sleep. It has been a long day." He rose wearily, stretched, and let loose a deep yawn. When he went to put the stirring volume back, he noticed something odd. Against the wall, in the empty space where the book had been, was a red stone. It was the only red stone in the room, the only one he had seen in the temple, in fact. On instinct, he reached out and gave it a push. The entire bookcase, along with a large section of wall, swung slowly inward, revealing a winding stairwell that sank into the darkness. Cedra appeared as surprised as he was.
"You didn't know about this?"
She shook her head.
"Should we ask your grandfather about it?" "Probably," she admitted, the secretive smile she had given him earlier returning. Jayden smiled back, seeing that she was of the same mind that he was. A dark staircase in a mysterious temple was far too exciting to pass up, no matter how tired they were. Just a peek. Placing a foot on the first step, he peered down into the black. As he did, a torch immediately flared to life in an iron bracket on the wall ahead of him. The steps disappeared around the bend with no visible end in sight. Intrigued, he started down with Cedra close on his heels. More torches sprang up on their own accord after every twist. Down they went, 5 revolutions, 10. Finally, they reached the end, and as they stepped out onto a polished marble floor, a large round room was suddenly illuminated by an intense glow. The light came from nowhere and from everywhere at once, as though someone had captured daylight and trapped it indoors. They gaped with wonder at the statues and contraptions that were suddenly brought to life by the unidentified light source. Jayden was familiar with the historical figures of nearly all the nations of Alnorda. He had to be. But the faces and even the dress of these statues were completely foreign to him. They were all similar, as if from the same unknown origin, but he could see no markings or crests to give them away. The detail on the sculptures was stunningly real. Some of them wore armor, with shields and weapons, while the others all wore strange, sleeveless robes held up by leather straps banded by metal. Beside every one of the robed figures stood a jet-black stone cat at least waist-high, frozen in time, prowling for eternity. "Who were these people?" "I have no idea. I've never seen anyone like them."
Almost as bizarre as the statues were the items strewn haphazardly amongst their feet. Strange discs and globes, metal boxes with knobs and levers, even a chair that did not appear to be made from wood, metal, or stone, but from a hardened substance that looked like melted candle wax. The most amazing sight by far, however, was the object in the exact center of the room. 2 silvery metallic arms reached out to surround a set of 3 oval steps, with no support that could be seen, which led to a small railed metal platform. The entire structure was surrounded by 5 small discs, which also hovered unsupported in a seemingly random pattern. The 2 curious youths circled the edge of the room, taking it all in, captivated by the statues, gadgets, and the enigmatic dais. Their reverie was soon interrupted by the sound of footsteps. They turned to see Quandus rounding the last bend of the stairwell.
"How did you find this place?"
"We only wanted. We couldn't help."
"Which book was it?"
Quandus demanded, cutting them both off. He did not appear angry. Excited was more like it.
"What do you mean?"
"The red stone, of course. Which book was it hiding behind?"
"The End of Nations."
"Ah,"
said Quandus, as if the answer should have been obvious.
"It was the cruelty of Nefarin for me. And how many books did you move?"
"Just 1.
"One?"
The old historian appeared almost giddy.
"Only 1? I must have moved over 100 before it came to me. Remarkable. You were meant to find this place, boy. There is something in here that badly wants to be seen by you."
"What is this place, Grandfather?"
"By my beard, I haven't the foggiest. But it's old, very old. There is nothing in any book about these people. My best guess is that they were the original builders of the temple and wanted to guard its treasures in person. Amazing, isn't it?"
The bright-eyed look of wonder was exactly as Cedra had described it, and she was right. He did not look nearly so old at that moment.
"Which is it, boy? What strange and wonderful thing is it that drew you here?"
Jayden surveyed the room once again. Everything was strange to him, but nothing more so than the next. Still, he could not stop thinking about the dais. It stood out, even among so many bizarre articles. There was something about it that did draw him. It was unfinished, a painting that needed the final brushstrokes to be complete. "What is that?" Quandus sighed.
"I wish I knew. I'm afraid the knowledge of it is lost with these people, whoever they were."
"They were Olamon's people," said a new voice. They had not heard Spurion approach. The wizard stood at the base of the stairwell. He was pale, with a tightness at the corners of his eyes, but remained upright unsupported. "The Tordani," he continued. "They were the first people, as far as we know. Believe it or not, some things predate even myself. In the modern common tongue, their name means 'those who know,' or something like that. The device is called the Morden Cadavra. I have no idea what it was meant to do. Father was always very secretive about it."
"What was it that they knew?"
"If I knew that, I would be one of them, wouldn't I? I, too, would be frozen in a basement, useless to anyone who needs me. It is best that you leave this place in the past, where it belongs. We leave early for Mora, though I do not know what good it will do any more."
"You are in no condition to travel,"
replied Quandus in a no-nonsense manner.
"You need at least a few days of rest, and then we will discuss the possibility of leaving."
"I do not need rest." Quandus eyed him carefully.
"Well, you may not need it, but the remainder of us are quite mortal and do not function well without it. These children have had a long and difficult journey to get here."
The two men stood staring at one another in silence, a battle of wills in which Jayden was not about to become involved. Cedra was more daring than he.
"Men," she sighed. "Which is it to be, rest or travel?"
Ask your grandfather, girl. He seems to be the leader of this little party."
"I am asking both of you, but you especially. We need you. Grandfather is wise, but he is no wizard."
"Wise?" Spurion exclaimed in mock surprise. "Did you not know? He is our new prophet, the first in over 2,000 years, for all it is worth now. Wise would hardly be a fitting description of his divine insight. The thoughts trust him with far more knowledge than a lowly wizard is privy to, especially me. With my powers a shadow of what they once were, I am reduced to nothing more than a glorified diplomat. Men will flock to your grandfather to bask in the glow of his wisdom. Mark my words, girl."
"Grandfather?"
Quandus's mouth was agape, and he appeared uncharacteristically unsure of himself.
"It cannot be. I study. That is how I know so much. Simple learning. I have had a long life. Anyone can gain the knowledge that I have if they apply themselves. I don't want people to come to me. I want to stay here and study in peace."
Spurion snorted.
"Do as you choose, old man, but you are the prophet, and nothing you say or do can change that. Why, do you suppose, were you drawn to the temple in the first place?"
"I stumbled upon it when I was a boy. It was blind luck."
"The great thoughts invented luck, and it is anything but blind. Like it or not, we are all caught up in their plans, and they will use us as they see fit. We leave at dawn, if that is acceptable, your greatness."
With a mocking bow, he turned on his heel and left.
"Grandfather?"
Cedra repeated, looking at the old man as though she had never seen him before.
"The man is mad,"
Quandus muttered, shaking his head.
"thoroughly and irrevocably mad."
"I don't think so. Spurion said that the temple was meant to be found by only one person. That person is obviously you. It is the temple of the prophet, after all."
Quandus pointed an accusing finger at Jayden.
"But he found it too. Are you telling me the Prince of Crysin is also a prophet?
Technically, he did not find it. He was led here by Spurion, just as I was once led here by you. And you do know things that no one could possibly know.
Poppycock! Anyone would know what I do if they would just read and pay attention.
You knew that Father and Brand were going to die.
A blank expression came over the old man's face.
That was why you tried to stop them, wasn't it? You insisted until Father became angry, and you fought with him. You had to know that you had a special gift after they were killed.
I learned that day that you cannot change the future, no matter what you think might happen. That is all.
I believe it was more than that.
I am not this prophet,
Quandus repeated stubbornly.
I don't understand your reluctance, Jayden interjected. Is it such a bad thing to be the prophet?
Quandus chuckled morosely.
Have you ever read Living with Prophecy, boy?
No, another book he had never even heard of.
It was written by Amina Gathon, the wife of the last prophet. His name was Barias. He was supposed to lead mankind to a new era of peace by putting an end to all of the wars between the nations of the south. And he did, for a while, but then things went terribly wrong. Somehow, how is unclear, it was he who helped King Zedith open the gate that the demons came through. No one knows who killed Barias. Some say it was Zedith himself, though that doesn't make much sense. But whoever it was, they left him alive long enough that they were able to make him swallow his own manhood. In the book, she describes how miserable his life was even before that. People worshipped him as though he was a god, and it almost drove him mad. So, you see, I am quite comfortable with my anonymity and my sanity. I would rather not be hounded by anyone, or butchered like a hog, for that matter. All of it is irrelevant, however, since I am not the prophet.
What about Alamon? You said that he was dead, killed by the betrayer, who must be Grisland. If this is true, how could you know of it?
Very well, I will show you what it was in this room that called me here, and maybe then the two of you will listen to reason.
He dug his hand into a pocket deep inside of his tattered robes and removed a small, plain, leather-bound book which he handed to Jayden.
Inside the pages of this book are untold truths that, as far as I can surmise, can only have been put there by Alamon himself. It tells of his death and of other things, mostly gruesome, yet to come. I am afraid that it does not leave much hope for the future. You, Princeling, according to the book, are our best hope for survival.
Me? He did not know how to respond to such an outrageous statement. Because I can reunite Crysin, so we will be ready to fight on the Day of Darkness. That must be what it means. But there was more to it, he knew. The fire lore is in your blood. That's what Magharine said. Was it his imagination, or was the book warm to the touch? It was certainly not warm down in the hidden room, but he was sweating nonetheless. Cedra crowded in close, and together they slowly opened the book. The first page was blank. They thumbed through the remaining pages. Nothing.
I'm sorry, Grandfather, but there is no writing in this book.
No writing? Give me that.
He tore the book away and thumbed through the pages himself.
Impossible! That wizard is playing tricks on us. He planned all of this. That's what they do, the mages. They plot and they scheme and they drag people into their little games. Well, I won't be a part of it.
Do you really think you have a choice, Grandfather? If the great thoughts have chosen you, then...
There is always a choice. And right now, I choose to go to bed. It is late, and we are leaving early, apparently. I would not go if I could help it, but I cannot leave the two of you to the mercy of that nearly barefaced conjurer, now can I? A little chin patch like that only belongs on a goat.
No one spoke as they made the journey back up the winding staircase and through the temple to the sleeping quarters. The pallets that Quandus had prepared were a collection of odd bits of soft things that the old man had scrounged from all about the temple. The end product was a mismatched pile of discarded clothes and linens that looked more like dirty laundry than a bed, but Jayden had seen worse in his recent travels. The hodgepodge of fabrics felt just as good as a proper mattress after the long day of riding. Spurion was nowhere to be found. Jayden was conscious just long enough to worm into a comfortable position and cover himself with a thick velvet curtain before he was deep into a dreamless sleep. The next morning came much too soon, beginning with a persistent tug on the arm from Quandus. Jayden rose groggily and rubbed the sleep from his eyes. He found Cedra just finishing a sweep-up of the main hall, continuing to put into service the broom they had made the previous evening. It seemed rather pointless since they were leaving and more dust was bound to gather in their absence, but he wasn't about to tell her that. Madame Lowry had once told him that keeping busy with things that could use doing was a good way to stay in the present when the mind wanted to drift into the realm of the unpleasant. He wished her a good morning, a little ashamed that she had risen before him, though not regretting the extra rest. The three of them ate a quick breakfast, mostly in silence, the coming journey obviously weighing on everyone's minds. Quandus did indeed grumble, half-heartedly, about Cedra's pointless clean-up of the main chamber, to which she replied that it would be nice and clean for his return. Spurion was conspicuously absent. They found the wizard when they went to gather the horses, standing in front of the fountain, gazing up at the wide-eyed statue as if trying to find something hidden within the sculpted marble. His visage had not improved overnight. If anything, he looked even weaker in the dim light of the morning. He joined them without a word, and they walked the two mounts down the little trail that led from the temple. Quandus looked back only once, when they were near the edge of the illusion that shrouded the place, his expression unreadable. Fog swirled around the base of the trees as they walked, playing tricks on the eye. There was no sign of the sun, though Jayden suspected that it had already risen above the lake, or they would be in total darkness. They received a shock after about an hour of travel, when a large stag sprang from a clump of bushes and stopped directly in their path. Spurion walked forward and stroked the animal's neck as if nothing was out of the ordinary, then frowned.
"Something is wrong."
"I'll say,"
Quandus remarked in response. Spurion ignored the old man and closed his eyes. After a moment's concentration, he swung his head around and looked behind them, muttering a curse. He spoke loudly toward the trees in a foreign language, using a lilting dialect that Jayden was positive he had heard somewhere before. A few seconds passed before two scrawny, dark figures in tattered robes stepped forward. It was difficult to recognize the pair through the dirt and grime, but eventually he could make out their faces.
Zaria? Guan?
"Hello,"
the Droka boy replied nervously. Zaria only smiled. Spurion looked at Jayden as though he had suddenly sprouted horns.
"You know these two?"
"Yes."
"That is impossible. All of this is wrong, don't you see? No one is supposed to know them, or even of them. What they are doing here is a mystery to me. They are supposed to be hidden, if the wrong eyes were to see them."
"And the hidden children below the mountain shall step into the sunlight, and be bound no more by ancient duty. For that will fall to another. He shall bear the burden of all. Then will the counterstroke brood in the spirit, and the waking world be unleashed upon those of natural flesh, and the dark armies will come in waves."
Quandus looked as startled as anyone at the words that had seemingly tumbled from his mouth of their own accord. All eyes were on him as he fidgeted with the end of his beard.
Did you read that from the book, Papa?
The old man did not answer. Spurion was shaking visibly, the veins in his neck beginning to protrude as he stared from one face to the next. He raised his hands in the air above his head, fists clenched. Just when it appeared he was about to scream, or let out some wizardly burst of power, or shout obscenities to the heavens, or some other dramatic demonstration born of his apparent frustration, he merely exhaled sharply and lowered his arms. First he began to chuckle under his breath, then laughed openly, throwing his head back and roaring with it. No one moved as the figure out of legend continued his bizarre behavior. Finally, his laughter subsided, and he sat on the ground with his back against a tree, scooping up dirt from a molehill and letting it cascade back down through his open fingers.
"At least someone is enjoying himself,"
muttered Quandus with his usual disregard for tact.
"Unfortunately, this party cannot afford to have everyone lose their minds, so if you will kindly pull yourself together, wizard, we have no choice but to continue on with these newcomers." Unless you intend to leave them behind for the trolls.
Do not worry about me, Prophet. I forgot how they worked sometimes, that is all. It has been a long while since I have listened to their voices on the wind as you do. I should know by now to expect the unexpected."
He let out one last self-debasing chuckle, picked himself off the ground, and brushed the dirt from his robes.
"I apologize for my recent behavior, to you two especially."
He looked from Jayden to Cedra.
"Neither of you requested that you be placed in your current predicament, yet you are handling it quite well. Better than I, it would seem. Nothing has gone according to my plans, and it is frustrating. Of course these two wanderers will join us. We will stop to let them eat, and then continue tomorrow on foot. I know of a somewhat comfortable shelter along the way where we can stop for the night. If all goes well, we will reach Mora by midday tomorrow. If not, then I suppose we will get there when the thoughts wish it."
Jayden was pleasantly surprised by Spurion's unexpected change of mood. They would need the temperamental wizard in the coming days, and things would go much easier between them if the man was at least cordial. The wizard's name alone would open many doors, even in Mora, and though he claimed he was nearly powerless, Jayden suspected that the truth was not so drastic. He was sure the man still had a few helpful tricks up those voluminous sleeves of his. Now he was free to focus his attention on the next man whose favor he desperately needed if he wanted to take Crysin back from Grisland. Field Marshal Torvin Deimos was a man who Jayden's father had always respected, appointing him governor of the East as soon as his predecessor had passed without leaving an heir. His main jobs included keeping the trade route open through the mountains and protecting the people from troll tribes when they decided to raid farms or attack settlements on the eastern borders of the realm. Jayden remembered the gray-haired veteran well from his childhood, though the man had been in the twilight of his career even then, which could potentially pose a problem. Would he have enough fire left in him to take over General Ekenroy's duties and lead the armies of Crysin in the field? He had their respect, there was no question about that, but soldiering was hard in the best of times, and this war was likely to be a long campaign against a cunning enemy. The young Droka were a smaller problem, but a nagging one all the same. He felt a responsibility to return them safely to their people. Dago was his friend, taking him into his home and caring for him when he had no one. He could not allow the Droka's spirited daughter to get herself into trouble. Worse still, she had apparently dragged Guan into her schemes, the lore master's son. What was she thinking? And how had they managed to sneak out of Druania in the first place? Had they used the hidden path that the warriors of Binway Druania had led him through, or had they somehow managed to slip through Hagmir now that Hysenthor was dead? "One thing at a time," he reminded himself. "I will deal with Torvin first, and then send the Droka home with an escort from Mora." Zaria and Guan were ravenous, devouring every morsel that was placed in front of them. Cedra had some spare clothing that she lent to Zaria, and Spurion managed to dig out an old gray robe from his saddlebags for Guan. The robe was faded, torn, and too large, but after Cedra hemmed up the bottom and Quandus added a leather cord from his book satchel for a belt, it was not too bad. Guan explained sheepishly to Spurion that the pair had wanted to see the outside world, so they snuck up the stairs at the rear of the council chamber and out through the fortress of the recently deceased sorcerer. Jayden strongly suspected that seeing the outside world was Zaria's way of convincing the boy to help her run away. "That still does not explain how they found us," Jayden commented after Spurion relayed Guan's words.
"The boy claims that he came across your tracks and recognized them."
"The forest is enormous. I have tracked these woods for years, and I could never have picked up so small a trail with so little to go on."
"No," Spurion agreed. "But it is possible that the Drokol Far have developed a method of tracking that is beyond common understanding. I confess that my knowledge of their people is somewhat limited. They have been sealed away underground for so long that their senses may have evolved in an unforeseen way."
"Meru has ways of finding people," Magharine had said. "Guan is Meru's son."
"After all," the wizard concluded, "what reason would he have to lie?"
No one could come up with a good answer for that question, and so it was a short time later that the newly expanded party found itself traveling to Mora through the thick fog of the Crystal Woods. At Spurion's urging, Jayden described his own experience in Druania as they went. Cedra was fascinated by the story of the underground kingdom and its enigmatic people, while Quandus seemed lost in his own thoughts. Spurion sighed frequently and knuckled his forehead, casting glances at the two Droka as though trying to wish them back inside the mountain. Jayden also spoke of his time in the dungeon of Hagmir, leaving out only the mental torture he had suffered from Hysenthor's sorcery, though the sympathetic squint of Spurion's eye said that the wizard could guess something of what he must have gone through. They traveled south all day without any further surprise encounters, and then west around the tip of the lake, following mostly animal trails. As darkness began to creep slowly over the forest, they stopped for the night beneath the shelter of a rock outcrop that Spurion had discovered and maintained in his previous wanderings. Trolls were a constant concern, but the fog never let up, and so they had no qualms about building a small fire for cooking and to help relieve the night's chill. There was wood already split and waiting, and a copse of pine trees shielded them nicely from any potential wondering eyes. The stag that had joined them that morning had stayed with them throughout the day, and was now curled up next to the fire like a house cat, to Cedra's utter delight. Jayden's last image, as he drifted off to sleep, was of the red-headed young woman stroking the animal behind the ears with a contented smile on her delicate face. There was a light sprinkling of frost on the ground when they woke, but the campfire had been kept up during the night by Spurion, who had not slept as far as the others knew, and was still blazing steadily. After a light breakfast, they doused the flames and headed out into another foggy morning with the expectation of reaching their destination before lunch. Jayden could not help feeling a little nervous when he thought about addressing the people of Mora, his people, as their leader. Would they accept him immediately, or had events transpired in his absence that would sway them against him? His father had been beloved by nearly all, but would that love carry over to the son? There would be no fanfare on his arrival, he knew. No one was expecting Crysin's heir to come crawling out of the forest after all this time, with a bizarre collection of companions to save them. The thought almost made him laugh. As they neared their destination, his thoughts were interrupted by a strange smell. Something was burning. The others must have smelled it too, for they all stopped without urging. Suddenly a loud, splintering crash echoed through the forest from some distance ahead. The little company looked around wildly, as if expecting to be attacked by some unknown force. Nothing came. Straining his ears, Jayden could hear a low, rhythmic sound. It was like a deep, guttural chanting. Spurion turned to address them from his position at the head.
"Stay here. I will investigate. If I do not return, skirt Mora and head south to Brineport and find help. And take care of Maggie. Wait for me an hour, no more."
With that, he leapt onto the back of the stag, and the swift animal shot silently into the trees. Maggie voiced her indignation at the sight of her master on another mount with a low snort. The 5 remaining companions milled about uncertainly in the wizard's wake. Quandus muttered something derogatory under his breath, but it was half-hearted. The old man had his own demons to wrestle with since the unexpected prophecy had come to him the previous day. This was not going as Jayden had imagined. Was he in charge of the party in Spurion's absence? He felt as though he should say something. "Stay close," he told them. "Be ready to move." It sounded like the right thing to say, something that his father or General Eckenroy might say if they were present. Cedra nodded her assent. Guan appeared bewildered by the entire situation, and Zaria stared blankly at him, clearly not understanding. He expected Quandus to poke fun at him, but the prophet remained silent with a strange smile on his lips. They waited. Half an hour passed. An hour. Jayden was reluctant to leave. What was taking the wizard so long? He had to return. They needed him. The chanting continued undisturbed until finally it blended into the background as though it did not exist, becoming another layer of silence. Quandus broke through both layers.
I know,
he shouted, causing everyone to focus their attention on him.
"What do you know, grandfather?"
Cedra asked with a touch of concern in her voice. The old man blinked. It was obvious that he had not intended to speak out loud. Jayden wondered what was going on inside of his gray-haired head. Was he hearing voices? Was he hearing them? The stag bolted out of the trees at that very moment, Spurion clinging to its horns as though they were reins. Pulling the animal to a halt, the wizard slid from its back to lie face up on the ground. There was blood on his forehead. The little party gathered around him anxiously.
"Trolls,"
the wizard breathed.
"hundreds of them. They are attacking the city."